The proceeding will start shortly.
Ready, Mark? Order, order. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session of the Justice Committee, and this is the first session of our inquiry into the prison's operational workforce. Very grateful to Mr. Fairhurst for coming to give evidence to us. We'll come to that in just a moment, but first of all, I've got to get everybody to declare their interests. I'm a non-practising barrister, former consultant to a law firm.
I am a non-practising solicitor, Chair.
Okay, you're okay.
I'm a former Solicitor General with a practising certificate, not currently in court work, and my brother is the Chair of the Prison Reform Trust.
Indeed. Okay. Well, and Mark, welcome. If you'd just like to introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, I'm Mark Fairhurst, National Chair of the POA.
Well, good to see you again. And I wonder, you know the scope of our inquiry, Mr. Fairhurst, and I'd just be interested, going straight into numbers. From your perspective, from the union's perspective, what would you estimate is the sort of shortfall we've got in prison officers? It seems to be accepted that there is a shortfall, but what's your assessment as to what it is?
So if you look pre-2010, when we had what we would assess as sufficient staffing numbers to run safer regimes, compared to what we've got now, we've got 2,200 less prison officers and 2,500 less operational support grades. Yeah. So we would like to go back to those sort of figures.
Perhaps for those who aren't familiar, the distinction between officers and the operational support grades in broad terms?
So prison officer obviously has the powers of a constable while they're on duty, as the powers of arrest, whereas an operational support grade does the non-operational stuff like control room, the gate, escorts, visitors and contractors around the estate. Still has in some instances prisoner-facing roles in reception and visits. But they do the ancillary stuff. They're not warranted like us. They haven't got the powers of a constable. Still essential to the running of jails though.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Okay. And then within that shortfall, are there particular areas of the country that you pick up as to where the pressures are greater than others?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure in London and the South East. They seem to be the main sticking points. And obviously, in other areas of the country where they're not in a city, they're difficult to get to, they're in remote areas, where they're affluent areas, the likes of, Long Larton is a prime example. They're really struggling with staff, Wayland, Norwich, Woodhill, Bullingdon. Yeah.
Are there areas where you don't have problems, particularly you'd highlight?
The recruitment is not an issue in the northwest and the northeast and some parts of Yorkshire, but the retention is an issue throughout the entire country.
Yeah, I mean, what's your assessment of where retention is on this, in broad terms?
We're at the highest attrition rate that the service has ever seen. We're currently running at 16% for prison officers and 19% for operational support grades, but there are some areas of the country which have seen attrition rates of between 35 and 45%. And the majority of people leaving the service are within the first 2 years of joining. So it's really not a good picture at all.
And again, historically, where does that sort of...
well, I can only tell you when I joined in 1992, we had an attrition rate of less than 2%. It was a career.
Yeah, okay. What do you think was the change?
There's a lot of things that have caused people to leave the job. I might as well start with the recruitment process. Yeah. So we feel the recruitment process is not fit for purpose. For example, you do an online assessment and then you do a job simulation which is assessed via Zoom. It's not relevant to prison officer work. You could be, for example, a manager at a shopping centre dealing with complaints from angry customers. But there's no interview process at all for such a responsible role. There's absolutely no interview panel. So you're getting people in charge of prisons, governors, who don't know who they've actually recruited because they never get to see them face to face or put them under pressure in an interview panel for such a responsible job. I just don't get it. We could save a hell of a lot of money by scrapping the job simulation and reinvesting in an interview panel so governors in jails can actually see who they're recruiting. You can learn a lot from someone in our job, from face to face, how they appear, how they react when they're under pressure. We don't have any of that.
Okay, we're going to come back to that in a bit more detail in a minute, but that's good sort of starting with. Because you see, the MOJ are saying they're going to recruit another 5,000 people. I mean, A, is that going to be enough? And do your concerns about the process by which they're recruited apply?
So HMPPS will paint a rosy picture because, in their words, for the last 5 months we've had less people leaving the job than we've had joining. But that doesn't tell the entire picture. For example, over the last year we've had 3,900 new recruits, but we've had 3,600 people leave. In December we had 279 joiners and 298 leavers.
Yeah.
So they might paint a rosy picture by saying we've got less people leaving, but does that mean less people leaving, but we're actually leaving more than what we're recruiting?
Yeah.
You know, the latest stats up until the end of last year do not paint a good picture at all.
Right. Yeah. What about this issue where extra help gets put in? There's sort of the operational stability and resourcing panel. I mean, what's that mean in practice for you?
Governors have to bid. If they're short of staff, they have to bid for additional money to fund bonus schemes and Payment Plus, which is the overtime for prison officers. And a panel sits and decide if they warrant the staff going in. For example, we've currently got 40 detached duty staff at Long Lartin because it's a remote high security prison and they can't recruit or retain staff. We've got a load of staff in Woodhill and Bullingdon, Wayland and Norwich. So if you're really struggling to retain staff, Bearman's another example in North Wales, if you're really struggling to retain staff, you bid for additional staff from the stability panel. But there are a lot of prisons out there who are struggling to run regimes who don't get that support.
Right, okay. Yeah, because I think we've seen 647 occasions, the stats we've seen between November 20 and November 22, and 46 being used. 46 prisons as of January of this year. Has that gone up or down? Is that different to...
That stays pretty stable, to be fair. But what you've got to look at as well is the overall pay bill for all this overtime and bonus schemes.
Yeah, sure.
We're looking at, you've got 37 million so far on Payment Plus, which is basic overtime for prison officers. You've got 11 million for OSGs. And then you've got the PP bonus schemes, the constant watchers and the bed guards where we supervise people in hospital. You're looking at over 50 million already. 50 million that could be put towards a decent pay rise for prison officers, you know, to entice them to stay in the job or to recruit the right type of people.
Yeah, okay. And that sort of the operational panel, the stability resourcing panel, what level does that operate at? Is this a national panel or a regional one? Or
it's staffed by directors. So all the directors would get together. There is a specific stability panel led by one particular director, and they will just get together once a week, look at the bids and decide if they warrant additional support.
That's across the country, basically?
That's across the country, national,
Okay. And you talked about Payment Plus and the overtime and the amount of cost on that. I don't know what percentage that is of the wage bill, that 37 odd million.
I wouldn't know, Bob, but it's well over 50 million now, all paid for by the taxpayer because they can't recruit and retain staff.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure we can work it out. Just out of that, on average, the best you can work out from your members, how many hours a week do you reckon staff are doing on overtime?
Well, it varies, but I've had members come to me saying if I don't work at least 50, 60 hours per month PP, I can't live on the wage. I know some people are working massively excessive hours, up to 100 hours a month on Payment Plus to make ends meet.
Right.
Because the starting salary, although it's attractive now, it's still not competitive enough.
Again, does that vary, same as the staffing pressures do across the country or not? You get more overtime pressures in London South East as opposed to elsewhere?
So in difficult to recruit areas, they're classed as red sites and they get a market supplement up to a maximum of £5,000 additional.
Right, okay.
But that can be removed at any time. It's not pensionable. And in some areas, because of the recent pay rise we've just had for fair and sustainable grades, that's now been eroded. So if you were an amber site, you got £3,000 market supplement. If you were a red site like London and the South East, and really difficult to recruit areas, you got £5,000. But with the recent pay rise, that's been eroded away from most.
Okay, thanks. Maria?
Thanks. Now, you've made some reference already to reasons why staff might be leaving, but is it obvious to you, is there an obvious reason, or is it a very broad range of reasons why staff are leaving? Because there's been over 4,000 in the last 12 months.
Yeah, there's some specific reasons. Well, let's look at the facts. If I join now as an 18-year-old recruit, I have to work for 50 years on the front line before I can access my full pension, because our retirement age is now 68. It's related to the state pension. So we must be the only uniform frontline service in the entire country that expects their staff to work in what I class as the most volatile, hostile and violent workplace in Western Europe for 50 years. That's just not practical. And that puts off a lot of people who don't realise when they join at a young age that they're going to have to work to the ripe old age of 68. The starting salary, although it is attractive now because of the recent pay rise, it doesn't compete with other sectors in the public service. So, for example, I could join the police force today and in 7 years' time I'd be earning a minimum of £41,000 a year. I could join the fire service and get more money. There are certain parts of the NHS I could join and get more money. I could level transfer to the border force and get more money. We're just not competitive enough. And they're all safer workplaces. When you look at the police, look at the equipment they get. They're walking around the streets with parva spray, tasers, batons, stab-proof vests, rigid bar cuffs. They've got armed response. We very rarely get that level of protection. In the closed adult male estate in 2018, they promised us parva rollout to improve our safety. We're still waiting now, all those years later, for parva to be rolled out in the estates that they promised us back in 2018. If I work in a youth custody estate, which is the most volatile and violent cohort that we have to deal with, if I work with juveniles under 18s, I'm walking around with a polo shirt. I've got no protection at all, and only over the weekend I'm hearing of one of my members who was seriously assaulted by an under 18 and ended up with a broken jaw and 6 teeth missing. We want protection for those people. That's why they're leaving. And you're getting rid of experience in the youth custody estate. We've got people who've worked with these juveniles for over 20 years and now being told they've got to do a professional qualification or transfer out. So that's another reason. The lack of support on the landings for new recruits is unbelievable. You very rarely see a governor on the landings. You very rarely see a middle manager, a custodial manager, because their workload is so great. They're just invisible leaders, and that's been highlighted time and time again by Charlie Taylor in his inspection reports. Yeah. So I don't want to work till I'm 68. I want decent pay, which is competitive with other public sector bodies. I want the protective equipment in place. I want support for new recruits, and I want to stop feeling undervalued and unsupported. We've got closed grades who very rarely get a pay award that matches fair and sustainable. These are the most experienced people who've kept the ship afloat for decades, and they just feel so unwanted and undervalued.
Well, I mean, that's quite a litany that you've set out there. And in fact, the results from the most recent Civil Service People Survey do reveal a fairly disappointing picture of staff attitudes and their experiences of working isn't out with what you've said. So do you think that they are representative, the findings of that survey, that obviously we can see? And are they, is it the same in all prisons or all parts of the prison service?
I'm not saying all prison managers are bad people. I've worked with some fantastic prison governors, but the majority of them now, unfortunately, are over-promoted, inept and bullies. And the staff survey, the most revealing part of the staff survey, will back that statement up. Staff are feeling bullied and intimidated by senior managers. If you're a disabled member of staff trying to get a reasonable adjustment, it's like trying to move heaven and earth. And God forbid, if you put a grievance in, most staff refuse to put grievances in because they're scared of the repercussions from higher up the food chain. Is this the
public sector estate that you're talking about?
Public sector,
public sector male estate.
Public sector, yeah.
What about the private sector? Is there a difference there? I mean, you won't obviously have all your members. You don't cover all of the private sector, but no doubt you've got some members.
We have a good relationship with the private sector. What the private sector tend to do is poach the decent governors that we have in the prison service who've got all the experience because they offer more money and it's more attractive. They've got less managers in place, so they're more streamlined and they're more innovative, so they don't have to wade through red tape or get permission from government ministers to, innovate. And what you'll find now with the private sector is, because our wages rose significantly last year, because of pressure from this union, by the way, not because government ministers wanted to do it, Because they rose by £3,000, now the private sector, who are winning these new contracts for new jails, have got to compete with us. So they're raising their bar. So what you'll find in the private sector is you'll have a level of bullying in every prison, of course you are, but it just seems to be so rife in the public sector.
Is there a difference in the women's estate?
The women's estate is just as bad as everywhere else. In fact, you'll find smaller jails in the women's estate. For some strange reason, they're even worse. Governors seem to target staff. I don't know if the board and they haven't got enough work to do, but it just seems to be rife throughout the entire service that there just needs to be a culture change.
But what do you put that down to? It didn't used to always be like that, did it?
No, because back in the 90s, your duty governor used to walk around the wings when they were on duty. They'd know your first name, they'd get to know you, to sit down and have a cup of tea with you, and they'd ask you what the problems were, and they'd come up with solutions. These days, you don't see governors on the wings, very rarely.
What are they spending their time doing? I mean, I'm sure
you're going to have to ask
them.
You're going to have to ask the governors, because I haven't got a clue, and neither of my members.
Right.
There's enough of them in the jail to get around.
Okay, all right, that's very clear. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Mr Simpson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a little earlier on, you're talking about the importance of having experienced officers, particularly in the youth estate. I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about how the loss of experienced staff impacts on the operation of prisons and the prison workforce. So we know, for example, both HMP Coldingley and Earlstoke, around 40% of the staff now have less than 2 years service, and HMP Wymont is about almost a quarter of band 3 officers have only had up to 2 years experience. What do you think this sort of operationally is having an impact within the prison estate, and where in particular are you suggesting, over and above the youth custody estate, that there are significant issues, maybe in different categories of prison, for example?
Yeah, so since 2010, we've lost nearly enough 100,000 years of experience. We've never recovered from that. I don't think we ever will. And the problem you'll find is, when you recruit join a job, we've got examples of people coming straight out of training, which now is only 6 weeks long, because they've now paused the apprenticeship scheme, which was for 12 months. Why they've done that, you're going to have to ask them. Got funding for it, but all of a sudden it's paused. I would imagine they're trying to get boots on the landings as quick as they can. So after 6 weeks, you've got people who are live, and we've come across scenarios where they've been in some jails where the most experienced member of staff on that same wing has got 9 months in the job. So it's the blind leading the blind. The massive knock-on effect for us is, as experienced members of staff, we've got to nurture the new recruits. We've got to make sure that they're all right, that they're competent at the job. We've got to coach them and give them, the benefit of our experience. And then you're finding them, after between 9 months and 2 years, they're leaving the job. So that has a knock-on effect on experienced staff. Why am I bothering doing this? They're only going to leave anyway. So morale reduces. When you've got inexperienced staff dealing with experienced prisoners who've been in and out of prison all their life, that has a massive knock-on effect on stability, because you haven't got that experience there who can build those relationships, who have been through what's getting thrown at new staff and can cope with it. I don't feel that the training is fit for purpose. It doesn't prepare them for the reality of prison life. Now, HMPPS directors will come and give evidence and say, but we've got new colleague mentors and we've got the buddy scheme, but that's not resourced. There's no additional resource for that. It's all at nil cost. And they rely on volunteers. So if I want a volunteer to be a new colleague mentor, I'll sit down with the new staff. I may be able to coach them on the landings. Or if I'm a buddy, I'll show them where the locker room is and the layout of the prison. But what happens if a prison doesn't get volunteers to do that? What happens if morale is that low that I don't want a volunteer to do that? What then? The prison service runs on pilot schemes. They've got more pilots than British Airways. And it runs on volunteers because they don't want to pay us for the additional skills that we've got. And it just has a massive effect on instability, because experienced staff build positive relationships with prisoners. Inexperienced staff, probably for the first time in 6 weeks, they've seen an angry prisoner. How are they going to deal with that without someone by their side to calm things down?
Are there any prisons that you're aware of where they're bucking this trend and they've managed to hold on to more experienced officers that it would be worth us looking at to understand how they've managed to achieve that despite the backdrop that you've just explained?
Well, I can only say that the old Victorian jails, like my own prison, Liverpool, we've still got a lot of experienced staff. We've got a lot of experienced staff who are partially retired and are working part-time. That works well. Some of the big London jails have still got a fair few experienced staff, you know. It seems to be the inner city big Victorian jails where there's been a tradition of experienced staff who stay as a career that bode well, whereas the likes of Berwyn, a fairly new jail, they're having massive problems with staff attrition and massive problems with keeping experienced staff. Yeah, the Wrexham jail, yeah.
Okay, just delving a little bit more into recruitment, and you mentioned before how the South East in particular is struggling. But are there any, going back to the question about experienced officers, are there any parts of the country where, or some best practice where recruitment of operational staff is playing out in a rather better way? And what is it that they're doing over and above some of the other parts of the country?
Well, they're not doing anything different to recruit, but what you've got to understand is a starting salary of £30,000 is really attractive if you work in, you know, if you live in the northwest or the northeast. You know, it's a really good wage, but you're relying on pay awards after that £30,000, and you're looking at your working conditions and the fact that you can't get a flexible working pattern, that you can't have a work-life balance, that if you're disabled, it's very hard to get a reasonable adjustment. So you've got all those factors to take into account as well. And what you tend to find in the northeast and northwest is some prisons over-recruit. So, for example, Frankland in the northeast in County Durham, I think they've got about 50 staff over their target staffing figure. So what they'll do then is they'll send them on detached duty. Because don't forget, we're a mobile grade. And at the moment, although all people on detached duty are volunteers, they can force you to go on detached duty whenever they want, because you're a mobile grade. Now, it's going to come to a point in the not too distant future when our employers will do what they call compel staff to go on forced detached duty for a period of 2 weeks at a time. All that's going to do is compound the situation, because if I'm a new recruit, I'm used to living at home, I've never been away from home, and I'm being forced to live 200 miles away at a prison that's unfamiliar with me, which is extremely violent, where I'm going to get no support, no induction. Staff aren't going to be, you know, I'm not going to know the staff that I'm working with, so they're not going to be too bothered about what I'm doing. That's going to encourage people to leave the job. And what we're saying is, detached duty's been with us for a decade now. It's never reduced. When's it going to end?
Can you give us a sense of the prevalence of that practice across the prison estate?
Well, we've got about 200 people out on detached duty at the moment, in red sites or difficult to recruit sites, or sites where the operational stability panel has decided they're going to throw in a bonus scheme to entice people to work longer hours for more money. So that's only going to increase the more we lose staff.
And are organisations like the Unlocked Graduates, are they effective in supporting recruitment in the prison service?
Well, the Unlocked Graduates is a separate entity to HMPPS, and that was set up to get future leaders of the service. And what you find in there is, yeah, we have them for 2 years as a Band 3 prison officer, but then they get a choice whether they stay on or leave and go into another field within the civil service or another public sector body. Now, I don't know how many people stay in a job after the initial 2 years when they've got a free master's degree out of us. You'd have to ask them. But what I find with the Unlocked Graduates, although I do support it, because at least they're getting that operational experience, whereas accelerated promotion schemes in the prison service, they're probably a prison officer for all of about 6 weeks. You know, the Unlocked do 2 years on the landings. The problem we've got with Unlocked is they seem to be getting more opportunities than experienced staff. So, for example, I was in Wandsworth not so long ago, and staff with 25, 30 years in the job were saying, we've been overlooked for temporary promotion in favour of an Unlocked Graduate. And Unlocked Graduates seem to get opportunities to go non-operational in headquarters on promotion at the end of the 2 years. Whereas, you know, Band 3 prison officers are 20, 25 years in the job. don't seem to get the same opportunities the unlocked graduates, which I feel is a bit unfair. It seems to me that experience counts for absolutely nothing within the prison service, when it should count for absolutely everything.
Just going back to the beginning of someone's employment in the prison service and going through the initial interview process and application, and you mentioned before how much of it's become sort of digitalised and on Zoom, and that it lost this sort of face-to-face contact that is necessary to really sort of eyeball someone and understand more about whether they're up to the job. And I remember when when I was working in children's social care, looking at the way frontline social workers were being trained up and recognising that there was a lack of experience of them in a live child protection situation, so I can see some parallels there. But could you tell us a little bit more about, beyond this online test, apparently I understand that there's then an integrated assessment centre with role plays, strength-based interview and behaviour-based assessment. Is that your understanding, and what feedback can you give us about that part of the interview process and the importance of it in making sure that we have high calibre candidates coming into the prison service?
So if you want to join the prison service, you go online, you do an online test, which is basic maths and English. And then if you're successful at that, you get invited to a job simulation assessment centre, which used to be face-to-face, but now it's done via Zoom, where you put through 3 or 4 different scenarios, not particularly related to the prison service. If you pass that, you then do your fitness test and a medical, then you get a start date for a training course. But, you know, I don't know how you can assess people for such a responsible job. Don't forget, we've got the powers of a constable on duty via Zoom, and the people assessing you are psychologists. Well, as soon as you start listening to psychologists in the prison service, you know, it's a recipe for disaster, because what works in theory definitely doesn't work with unpredictable human beings. So there is no face-to-face interview at all to join such a responsible job, and I just can't get my head around that. The vetting procedures are not fit for purpose. I mean, when you join the police, as part of your medical, you get DNA sample taken to see if you're a drug abuser. Why aren't we doing that in the prison service? I've got an example of a member of staff who was recruited as a prison officer and had a caution for assault on police and was walking the landings as a prison officer with a caution for assault on police. That was missed during the vetting procedures. It's an absolute mess.
How recently did that occur?
Well, that member of staff resigned of their own volition but worked as a prison officer for over 12 months. It was highlighted to directors. I believe vetting is starting to improve, but it's still not thorough enough.
So what's the minimum amount of first-hand experience on the landings in a prison that a new prison officer has to have before they are deemed to be qualified to do that job?
We've got a 12-month probation period, but that brings its own problems, because custodial managers who are line managers are supposed to have meaningful conversations with everybody on their hierarchy every 8 weeks, because the MOJ are trying to align policies with HMPPS. Seems to be a bit of a power struggle at the moment between HMPPS and the MOJ. The problem being the MOJ are bringing about policy change within our service that doesn't relate to the operational line. So it's all very well and good, someone in the MOJ saying, as a line manager, you must sit down with the 6 staff you manage in an office-based, non-operational role and have meaningful conversations with them 8 weeks. If you're a custodial manager in the prison service, you've got between 18 and 26 staff to look after. You're doing nights and looking after the jail, you're dealing with incidents, you're doing act reviews. And now you've got to sit down with your 24 staff every 8 weeks and have a meaningful conversation and make sure they're all right. It's not practical, it doesn't happen, it's a complete and utter failure. So After 12 months probation, if you've got no disciplinaries, if you haven't had your probation extended, if you've done okay, then you pass your probation and you're deemed a competent prison officer. But the problem now is we've got people in the job with 13 months, 14 months, 18 months, temporary promoted to Band 4 supervising officers and Band 5 custodial managers. When I joined the job, you had to have at least 4 years in the job before you could take the senior officer exam. And by the time you passed that and sat an interview, you had a minimum of 5 years in the job. So I think we need to go back to something like that. If you're going to supervise staff or manage staff, you need operational experience. To do away with that and just say, well, as soon as you completed your probation, you can be temporary promoted, or in some instances, substantively promoted. It's no wonder our jails are in such a mess, and that's not a fault of the staff. The only way they can earn additional money is by getting promotion.
And what opportunities are there for them to have the requisite training to progress through the various grades?
You don't get any training when you're a manager. So you go from a Band 3 prison officer to a Band 4 supervising officer. There's no training. There's no training course. You go from a Band 4 to a Band 5 custodial manager, which is a middle manager, one rank below a governor grade, a line manager. You get zero training whatsoever to be a custodial manager. You don't know how to give a sick leave excusal. You don't know how to process an ill health retirement. You get nothing. There are no training courses. You're thrown in at the deep end. And if there's not an experienced custodial manager to show you the ropes, you're going to sink before you swim.
Right. Just finally for me, Chair, on both on recruitment and progression through the prison service, is the governor sufficiently involved in that?
No, because you have to do an assessment centre to be a custodial manager. So you have to fill in a workbook, and then you have to go to an assessment centre, which is again done by Zoom, and you get assessed, and if you pass, then you can put in for a custodial manager's job.
In terms of the operational staff who are coming into the service, what sort of oversight or involvement would a prison governor have in that?
To become a custodial manager, you would actually sit at an interview panel once you've passed what's called a custodial manager assessment centre. But the problem being, we haven't got enough spaces on those assessment centres for everybody who wants to progress on promotion. So you could have, for example, 12 people in your jail who want to be custodial managers, yet that jail's only been given 4 spaces on a custodial manager's assessment centre. So then the governor's got to sift and decide which 4 are the most suitable.
Okay.
And of course, we all know about nepotism.
All right. Nepotism manifests itself in what sort of way?
Well, if I'm challenging you as a governor because I think your decision-making is wrong and I'm temporarily promoted to custodial manager, and yet you've got a nodding dog with a few years in the service who's keen for promotion, you're not going to choose me to go on an assessment centre, are you? Because you don't want me challenging you.
It's as simple as that, you think, it is a certain degree. You rock the boat that you...
Well, yeah.
As it's
If you
perceived
put your
of-
head above the parapet, Bob, it'll get cut off. Because that's the prison service. They don't like being challenged.
That seems as if it was almost a complete breakdown of trust between yourselves and management, doesn't it?
Well, we're the only frontline uniform service where our leaders don't wear a uniform. Tell me why.
Okay. What response do you get when you raise that? Because I know you're never backwards in coming forwards with your concerns from members, Mark.
They just bury their heads in the sand and pretend it doesn't go on, but I know it does because I've got enough complaints from my members to prove it.
Yeah, okay.
Look at the staff survey.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough, thanks. Janet.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, the Chief Inspector's report on the experiences of black adult prisoners and prison staff found evidence of racism and barriers to promotion. As a union, do you recognise these concerns?
That was really painful reading for someone like me, so dedicated to the service and proud of what I do. It was really painful reading. But we've highlighted to directors in the prison service time and time again that they're not proactive enough. They don't do enough to stamp it out.
Okay.
As a union, we have expelled people from our union for being racist, for being homophobic, for being misogynistic and sexist. And time again, through disciplinary procedures, HMPPS have kept people who are blatantly racist in their job. Now, I just hope from that thematic review that they actually take action in a timely manner, because they're still considering the Lamy report. They haven't implemented everything in that. So I'm hoping this time that they actually do something about it, that they listen to the voice of our black prisoners, listen to the voice of our black staff. They get into the communities, engage with community leaders and break down those barriers, but more importantly, put robust procedures in place to rid the service of these people.
And would you say that black prison staff are disproportionately leaving, you know, the job more than, you know, white counterpart staff?
I wouldn't say that across the board. I would imagine in certain areas through experiences, then they're probably looking for something better because of what they've gone through. But when you look at the demographics, there are certain areas in the country where we're very short on a representative of our communities. You know, go into some London jails and it's very representative of the communities, but you go into some northeastern jails and it's not. So I think we need to do more to recruit more ethnic staff, to recruit more minority staff, you know, to, you know, as a, you know, to represent the people we care for.
Yeah. Thanks. And is the HMPPS race action plan good enough, do you feel, to address the structural barriers faced by black, Asian and minority ethnic staff?
Well, that remains to be seen, because they're still formulating the race action plan and we're heavily involved in that. What I would like them to do more of is have focus groups with the staff it affects and ask them what they want to see in a race action plan. Get around the country, interview staff and find out what they want to see and what action they want taken to deal with it. And I don't think they do enough of that.
Do you have your members that come to you to talk about those issues, and how do you support them as a union?
We've got loads of support mechanisms in place. You know, we can help them locally because we've got local committees in every jail, so we can make our committees aware. We can help them through the whistleblowing process or the grievance process, and we can support them in every way possible. What you'll find is, though, there are a lot of people who are suffering who don't want to come forward because they're scared of the repercussions from senior managers. And that's quite sad. We've got a whistleblowing policy that is simply not fit for purpose. They should call it a sweep it under the carpet policy, because that's what happens.
So what do you think needs to change to make a difference? I mean, you have mentioned some stuff already.
You need to engage with staff, you need to engage more with black prisoners, you need to engage more with communities that are underrepresented, and we need to come up with a plan that is practical and suitable and workable for everybody. And we definitely need to recruit more people to diversify our prisons, because we are underrepresented. But there's a lot of barriers in those communities who are anti-authority and distrustful of the uniform we wear. So maybe we need to get into those communities and find out why and break down those barriers and encourage people.
Thank you. So obviously you've mentioned about, you know, the prison service being understaffed, and if we look at pre-COVID, then obviously a lot of prisoners spent a lot of time locked in their cells. But because of few staff to run activities, work and education, how do you see that at the moment? Do you see that prisoners are having these regimes back in place, or is it still pre-pandemic levels?
It's a mixed bag. There are some prisons where they've got decent staffing levels, where they're putting on more activities, where there's more time unlocked. The problem being that not every jail has enough activity spaces for the people they're looking after. So, for example, you could be locking up 1,000 prisoners and only have 500 activity spaces. So that means you have to go to part-time working. So in the morning, I might only be able to get out for a shower, a phone call, half an hour's exercise, maybe clean my cell before I get the next lot out. But in the afternoon, I'll be going to work. What we want to see is activity spaces for all prisoners, but then you're relying on recruiting staff to work in workshops, relying on recruiting teachers to work in education blocks, and they've got the same problems as us. It's difficult to recruit people to work in a prison because the wages are so poor and the environment is so hostile. And that's a big, big issue. So there are some jails now where they can provide a stable and a productive and predictable regime, but there are a lot of prisons who, simply because they can't recruit enough staff, have very restricted regimes.
Are the regimes different during the week than at the weekends?
Yeah, you're more restricted of the weekend because you've only got half the complement of staff on duty of a weekend. And the problem is, if you look at the prison service, so we work on a 20% non-effective. So for 20% of the staff, they'll either be on leave, on the sick, or training. Most jails now are running at 30% non-effectives. And then they've only got 50% of the staff that they can recruit because of recruitment difficulties. So already you're down to less than 50% of the staff you should have to try and run a full regime. Well, you can't do it. And that's another issue, another pressure on staff, that some governments are adamant that they want to go back to a full regime. Well, you can only run a full regime if you've got 100% of the staff on duty. If you've only got 50% of the staff on duty, then 50% of the regime has to fall. You have to drop tasks. Well, some governors don't want to do that. They want to do everything to make themselves look good. That has a knock-on effect on staff.
What does that look like in terms of hours? You know, like during the week, how many hours would they, on average, have out of their cell on the weekend? What would that look like? In a
decent jail where you've got decent staffing levels, I would imagine you would have a minimum of about 5 hours unlocked during the day and about 3 hours of a weekend. And for restricted jails, I know of some prisons where they're lucky to unlock for an hour a day because simply they haven't got the staff on duty, which is quite sad.
Yeah, very sad.
We don't want that. We don't advocate, prolonged periods of bang up for prisoners. We want to see prisoners active, addressing their offending behaviour, learning skills that can get them employment upon release. That's what we want to see, but that's going to take a major investment.
I'm going to ask you the next question. You've already mentioned pay and people having to work significant overtime and pay scales, but I'm just going to ask you the question anyway, see if there's anything more you'd like to add on it. So, do you feel the current pay and rewards package reflect the complexity of the prison officer role?
No, not at all. Not at all. If you look at our pay awards or lack of pay awards since 2010, we've never had an inflation matching or an inflation busting pay rise. We've been subject to pay freezes for several years, pay pauses. Last year, we forced the government to implement the £3,000 pay award for fair and sustainable staff. That then brought them up to a level similar to closed grades. It's now an attractive starting salary, but to earn any more, you're relying on pay awards or promotion. And that's the problem. We're trying to compete with other bodies. People are leaving to get jobs on the railways as trained guards on the same money as a prison officer, trained drivers on significantly more. We've got people leaving for less money to work in supermarkets because it's a safer environment, and they can earn just as much money working in a supermarket on an hourly rate with a bit of overtime as they can on the landings.
As well as an increase in the pay award, what additional benefits or support do you think prison staff would need or should have?
Well, for starters, our retirement age needs to be reduced. We cannot work in that environment in our 60s. Would you want your grandparents in their late 60s rolling around the floor with a violent 21-year-old? No, you wouldn't. It's not practical. It's cruel. It's actually inhumane, and it needs to be sorted. And the only people who can sort it are the people sitting in front of me, the politicians, to put pressure on the government, to put pressure on the Treasury to fund it. We are a unique workforce in a unique environment, and we need bespoke policies and bespoke things in place for us, and retirement age is one of us. So we need that reduced. Also, the levels of violence we face on a daily basis, without the protective equipment to deal with it, nobody else would put up with that. That's not encouraging people to stay in the job. So there's a whole host of things that we need to be sorted out. But the big one at the moment is retirement age, pay and protective equipment at work.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maria.
Just coming on to, I was just going to ask you, I think you've half answered that in the question you've just answered, the question about what you think the appropriate retirement age is. You just said you didn't think people should be on the landings in their 60s. Are you saying that you should have the same retirement age as, say, the police and firefighters at 60?
Well, what I'm saying is we haven't got the right to strike. It's illegal for us to take any sort of industrial action. I can't even inform my members to work to rule or refuse to work overtime because I'll end up in the High Court, breaching a High Court injunction. So if you're going to class us as such an essential service to the public that you can't allow us to go on strike, then why would you then expect us to work to the age of 68? The police can retire after 30 years service or age 60. The fire service can retire age 60. They're a frontline uniform service. Why can't we retire age 60?
Okay.
Lord Hutton neglected to include us as a frontline uniform service. He classed us as civil servants who were desk-bound. We're not. We're unique. We face violence every single shift. The police don't. They might go through the entire week dealing with pleasant people. Another weekend, they have to deal with a bit of violence when the pubs spill out. We deal with violent people every single shift, and we're expected to do that in our late 60s. There's no support for you if you've got mental health problems. There's more and more of my members getting diagnosed with PTSD because of the trauma they deal with, because of the things they see. There's actually no mental health support on site for those staff. They're leaving the job with ill health retirement or capability. So there's no support there for mental health. And as I say, if you're going to say to us, you can't have the right to strike, then at least treat us like the police and the fire service and allow us to retire with dignity instead of expecting us to die in service.
Okay. Again, that's very very clear. Damien Hines is the minister, the current minister, recently said that no discussions have taken place with colleagues in the Treasury or the Cabinet Office on pension age. I mean, what's your response to that?
Well, we keep coming back to government to two different scenarios where we've had two separate offers to reduce our retirement age. The last one in 2017. But it wasn't a standalone offer. So the last offer was you could have state pension age -3 and the Treasury will fund it. But that, as it stands, gives us a retirement age of 65. And if the retirement age, as is suggested and reported, rises to 70, we're back to square one. We're back to a retirement age of 67. So if we're that important to the running of the country, if we're that essential that you can't allow us to go on strike, why would you expect us to work in our 60s? We had a retirement age of 60 when I joined the job in 92. In 2007, it got increased to 65. And that was supposed to be for a generation. Well, a generation when I was at school is 25 years. Then it was changed in 2015 to state pension age. What we're saying is, we're less than 5% of the civil service pension scheme. We're a bespoke workforce, a unique workforce. It wouldn't cost a great deal to just say to us, you can retire from the age of 60 onwards, but we're not going to abate the pensions you've accrued. And that way, people could have a choice. If they had to keep on working in the 60s, they could, because of individual circumstances. But if they've had enough and they want to retire, they can, without abatement. Why abate our pensions? We've earned it. They don't do it in the private sector. Why do it in the civil service?
Okay, so what impact does... You've mentioned there is an impact from this on retention, probably rather than recruitment, because I don't know too many 18-year-olds who are thinking about when they're going to retire. But you're suggesting there's an impact on retention. What are you seeing happening since you've seen that increase in the pension age?
Yeah.
With the more experienced...
We're seeing more and more experienced staff deciding that they don't want to stay in the job and they're leaving for other industries, in some circumstances taking a pay drop. We're seeing that more and more.
Is this people in their 60s?
This is people in their 50s.
In their 50s?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've also made some reference to there being no mental health support for prisoners, for prison officers, who are, often see a lot of difficult things that don't leave you very easily. What impact is that having on your members?
Well, our employer will tell you that they've got a 24/7 helpline where you can phone up and get, support over the phone. But we don't want to phone someone who we don't know. We don't know what the qualifications are. We don't want to do that. You do get 6 sessions of counselling if you need it, but only 6. If you want or require more than 6, then the prison has to put a business case forward to fund more than 6. They don't have any residential support for people with mental health problems or with physical injuries. The only people who do are the union, the POA. We share the firefighters' rehab centres across the country where people with mental health conditions or are recovering from serious assault with physical injuries can go and stay residentially for a period of 5 days at our expense. You know, the civil service is a massive organisation, as is the prison service, and we have nothing that supports staff in that way. And I don't know why, but what I would like to see a counsellor or a mental health nurse or a psychologist or psychiatrist on site in every prison. So when I'm involved in something traumatic, instead of me going off duty and phoning in sick the next day and maybe having a prolonged absence from work, maybe I can walk off the landings into a room and offload on a professional person, knowing that that support is in place, which may reduce the sickness levels we're seeing, and certainly will, may help me prevent me from getting PTSD. But there's none of that. There's absolutely nothing. What we've got is not fit for purpose, and it's not helping our staff.
Have you seen in your time the trends of mental ill health amongst officers increasing? Massively, because the job's more violent, it's more traumatic. We're seeing more and more things that we never used to. We're dealing with more self-harm, more self-inflicted deaths, and we're dealing with more prisoners who've got mental health conditions. We're not trained to deal with them. We don't get any mental health training whatsoever. We used to, before the pandemic, get a 3-hour session on mental health awareness. I've been in the job 31 years. I've never been mentally health trained. I haven't even done that course. They're expecting us to learn in 3 hours what a mental health nurse goes to university for 3 years. We've got no training whatsoever. We've got no training to deal with the elderly population. That all adds to the pressure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Final thing, Mike, you mentioned more protective equipment. You mentioned Parva, for example, in the rollout. Have you been given a date for when it is supposed to be rolled out?
Well, the criteria for rolling out Parva is so strict that we find ourselves in a position now where we're still waiting years later to get it rolled out. Our employer hopes by the end of March this year to have it rolled out within the entire closed adult male estate. But again, those estates, those prisons, they've got to meet the criteria. So, for example, I could train you in Parva today, Bob, but you wouldn't get it issued straight away because I'd be saying to you, oh, no, you have to wait for 50% of the staff in that prison to be trained in Parva before I issue it. That could be 9 months later. It's like sending the army into Afghanistan with a rifle but not giving them bullets. And in the youth custody estate, they've got absolutely nothing.
Is it intended to roll it out in the youth estate or not?
The youth estate's getting worse, and because politically we're dealing with children, I think there's a lot of pressure not to issue it. But I don't know a copper who stops and asks you your age before they spray you with Parva or taser you. If you're violent, they're going to protect themselves. Well, why can't my members have that protection? I'm only talking about an irritant that makes your eyes water. And when it's being used in a closed adult male estate, it's been very successful. I wouldn't want my members carrying batons to deal with juvenile prisoners, but I'm quite happy for them to spray them with a pepper spray.
In the adult estate, are there other things that you would want batons be suitable in the adult estate?
We've got batons in the adult estate.
So you could use that.
We haven't got batons in the female estate or closed estate. The female estate is becoming more violent. Again, I'd be happy for Parva to be rolled out there. The open estate's got their own problems, particularly of a night, with intruders bringing stuff in. They need more protection. But that's why people are leaving, because they don't feel valued. I mean,
yeah, I get that.
In the House of Commons, Bob, when do you ever hear politicians say, oh, we value our public services and mention prison officers? They don't. They mention the NHS, the police and the firefighters. They very rarely mention prison officers. And that's why my members are saying, we're part of the forgotten service. No one values us. No one cares about us. Yeah. Morale is at rock bottom.
Body-worn cameras, would that help?
We've got body-worn video cameras.
Roll out fully?
But again, that's only because the POA campaign for them.
Understand that, yeah. Okay. Right. Any other questions from any of our colleagues? I think that's
Just say that I do value the prison staff and prison officers, and thank you for coming to share with us today.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and I really hope that something comes of this.
Yeah. Well, it's been very helpful evidence, Miles. Thank you very much for your time and giving your evidence to us.
Very
Much
welcome,
appreciated.
Bob. Thank you all.
See you soon, no doubt. All the best. Thank you. We'll have a swap round of the